of belonging and community, or family and community, it can actually have profound negative effects, not just on our mental health, but also on our physical health. So tonight, what I wanted to talk with you about was a little bit related to how we build those relationships in an even more equitable, respectful, fair, nurturing kind of way. So I'm just going to share my screen and then I will grab this PowerPoint presentation and we will jump into it from the beginning here. So that's me looking much less Mickey Mouse. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you all here. It's kind of great that Kamala thinks that I'm wonderful, and I had the great fortune of meeting her at the Global Women's Peace Conference a few weeks ago. But I thought you might be interested to know something of other things we have done as a team. I run 3 businesses, and the places above the line there are some of the clients with whom we've worked, either currently or in the past. And the spots below the line are places that we have appeared in the media. So I just thought I'd give you that to give you a little snapshot of who we are as a business. But I think that fundamentally important to the success of the work that we do, whether we're talking about changing children's lives through our, it's now called, our camp program is now called the Ignite Camp program. Whether we're doing that with children, or whether we're doing that with businesses, or whether we're doing that with international corporations, from my perspective, the most important part of what we do is that we come from the heart. And, you know, for a community such as yours, that's about your faith. But it's also more than that. It's actually about making sure that as we walk our path, we're embodying our faith, we're truly making decisions from a place of heart. And more importantly, we're building those relationships with one another and the people that are in our world from a place of open-heartedness. And I know it sounds funny, but what I get to do is I get to go and work with, you know, large corporations and banks and big businesses and talk about love. And I admit that to begin with, they look at me a little strangely. Stephen's laughing away there. Yes, Stephen, they do laugh at me. They kind of look at me like, what? You're here in a bank. This is a bank. We don't talk about love. And I say, well, then you should. So I think it's just really important for us to be present to the importance and the power of coming from a place of love. And if I might be so bold as to suggest that it's never been more important than it is now. I think the impact on people emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally of the last two to 3 years has been really punishing. And I think the bringing back the kindness and generosity of the human spirit, I think, is fundamentally important, because in many ways we've been divided and locked up and separated, and our capacity to belong has been really challenged. So as with all things in the work that we're doing, when you're thinking about the kind of relationships that you build, I think it's really important that we start with asking why. Why is this relationship important to me? Why are the relationships that you have in your interfaith group important to you? Why is your faith important to you? Why is family important to you? And when we understand the why behind things, we understand what I like to call the more elevated or spiritual essence of things. So one thing that we encourage people to think about is, what is your big why? I'm not going to ask you to answer this question, but you might just like to think about, why are you here? Why is this important to you? Why is your faith important? Why is the interconnectedness of your community important? Sometimes we get hooked in the how. We live in a culture where we go from, here's the problem, here's how we fix it. But in fact, when we come from a place of how, we deny the possibility of a different way of viewing the situation that we're in, and a different exploration of other possibilities as to how we might move out of it. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is, some of you will remember the having your children at about the age of 3 or 4. And they would ask questions like, Mom, why is this like this? And you would say, well, sweetheart, because of this. And you'd explain it. And they'd go, oh, but why? And then you'd explain it again. And they'd go, oh, but why? And they just go on and on and on. Now, the reason they do that is not specifically to annoy you, even though most of us have about a 5 but why tolerance. But they go on like that because the answers to those questions helps them to create connections within their brain that make meaning. So they're actually creating neural pathways or ways of understanding information. But equally, if we stop asking why, we stop being present to the wonder and the magnificence and the miracles that can happen in our everyday interactions with people. So the first thing I'd encourage you to think about is, why are you here? Why is this connection important to you? Why is this community important to you? Why is this person or this family important to you? Because when you really dig into that and you understand the essential essence of that, it's so much easier then to make sure that you bring that forward in your everyday interactions. Once you understand that big why, I think the most powerful gift that it gives you and that you can then give the world is the gift of presence. In a world where we're so disconnected, not just because of COVID, but because of technology. And, you know, once upon a time, the family all lived together in the local community. I was raised on a farm in the country, and all of our cousins were, you know, 20 minutes to half an hour away. Like the family was all close by. Well, close by country standards. Our nearest neighbour was 4 miles away. So if you wanted to go and play with your neighbours, you had to take a decent bike ride or run. But family meant something different because there was a sense of the village. But these days we're spread far and wide. For some of you, you will have brothers and sisters or family members or children or grandchildren or whatever it is in multiple countries. So I do think that it amplifies the importance of this notion of presence and truly being present. I actually believe that the greatest gift you can give anyone is your presence, with a C, not with a T, your presence, and being really present to who they are and how they're feeling and what's going on for them. And that's totally true in your relationship, whether it's your relationship with yourself, with your relationship with your God, whether it's relationship with others in your community or your family. But just being really, really present to what it is that's actually going on for you and the people that you love. My grandfather, when I was quite young, used to say, sweetheart, you have 2 of these and only 1 of these. Use them in proportion. And tonight I probably won't because I'm speaking with you, but if I was in the same room with you, I'd be asking a whole lot more questions. But that speaks to the presence speaks to the power of the quality of relationship, of giving people the impression that they're truly heard. Our team operates from one fundamental belief, and that is that all any of us really want is to love and be loved, and to be known, loved, seen, heard, and got for who we truly are. And that can only be achieved if you are able to be present to people and if they are able to be present to you. The other thing that I want to talk about is the difference between being in action or being in attraction. I think that a lot of us, and I don't like to pick on the girls, but I think particularly the women, we are very, very good at being busy. And I'm sure most of you know the experience of falling into bed at the end of the day, utterly exhausted and thinking to yourself, what did I achieve today? I honestly felt like I ran from here to there and back again all day. And I just don't know what I achieved today. We're very good at being in action. But that's largely the result of us asking the question, what's going on and how can I fix it? What's happening? How can I get everything done today? How can I do all the things I need to do and turn up on the call tonight and be a wonderful chairperson and remember Heather and Kamala's name? So, you know, we're so busy. We get hooked into, I sometimes call it the badge of busyness. You know, when people say to me, so how are things for you, Heather? And I say, they're wonderful. They're wonderful. I'm only working 3 days a week and things are just great. And there's a lot of balance and I have time for my children. That takes a lot of time, by the way, because there's 8 of them. And then some of them have children. So, you know, but they look at me as if there's something kind of a little bit odd. You know, what do you mean? You're not busy? Well, I'm busy enough, yeah, but not too busy. And it's almost as if they're a bit taken aback because we seem to value action. But if you stop and think about the fundamental teachings of our faith, if you stop and think about the great minds through the generations and through the centuries, they talked about stillness. There's a Rumi poem that I love, and it says, there is a voice within you that does not use words. Be still and listen. And I think it's increasingly difficult in this strange, busy age that we're living in for us to truly be still and listen. But if you can't be still and listen to yourself, if you can't be still and listen to God or the universe or whatever it is for you, then it's really hard to be fully present to other people. So instead of having a situation arise and asking, how do I fix it? Which hooks us into action. Now, when we take action, there's motivation. There's an increase in motivation. When there's an increase in motivation, there's an increase in action. More action, more motivation, more action. But before too long, that becomes the rat on the treadmill. We just get pulled into running all the time, flat out. Part of the reason that grandparents play such an incredibly important part in the lives of grandchildren is because they've often got more time to be present. But I don't know why we wait until we're old and wise before we start to practice presence. By contrast, if we have a situation or something comes up and instead of going straight to how, which is a very Western way of thinking, we stop and think, oh, well, why is this important? Why has this come about? Why do I want to solve this problem? Why do I want to do things differently? Why do I want to have better relationships? Why do I want to increase the level of respect with the people about whom I care? And when we ask questions from a why place, it's as if some sort of magical space opens up in our thinking. You know, people like me used to take business people away 10 years ago on what we call blue skies strategy session. And really, it was just another way of being innovative and creative and shifting our level of thinking. You know, Einstein said, you cannot solve a problem at the same level of thinking at which you created it. So we need to shift our thinking. So when we ask why, what happens is we get inspired. You know, whenever you ask a child why, they will usually go, and physically look up, because that's the source of all great things. That's the source of greater inspiration. That's the place where miracles happen. When we're more inspired, we get into attraction. The greater the attraction, the greater the inspiration. The greater the inspiration, the greater the attraction. And we call that flow. And life, when there's a great deal more flow, has ease and grace and elegance and presence in abundance. So what gets in the way? Usually our emotions. One of the most unfortunate aspects of, I think, the culture in which we all live is that we're very black and white. Certain feelings are okay, certain feelings are not okay. In fact, not only are they not okay, they're bad. Happiness, good. Anger, bad. Well, you know, sometimes when I get angry, it's actually really good. And being able to express that anger, as long as it's positive in the way I express it and I don't make it other people's problem, is actually really good for me as well. Emotions are just signposts. They are literally just signposts. They are indications of when we're off track or when we need to redirect and get back on track. And how we work with our feelings absolutely determines our experience of life. Now, the difficulty with our relationships is that the people that we love the most have the greatest ability to push our buttons. In fact, I think my children were born particularly to show me where my buttons are. And when you've got 8, there's always one of them leaning on, sitting on, or poking a button. But our ability to understand our own emotions and our ability to be present to our emotions and accept them all, not some are good, some are bad, but to accept the whole jolly lot, the gift of the experience of life, is that we get to have these emotions and we actually get to work with them and understand them as part of the journey that we go through in this life. And I think as people that care about other people in our families and our communities and our faith community and so forth, the ability to be present to people's emotions is actually incredibly important. Another aspect of this is our values. And values is a strange word because, you know, we talk about it a lot, but do we really understand what it means? And do we really understand what our values are? Certainly in the healthy relationships where there's a great deal of respect and regard for one another, it is because people know their own values, but they also know how to respect the values of those around them. And really understanding how to make choices and decisions in alignment with our values. And I've kind of just created a little working definition there for us for tonight. Values are the principles or standards by which we live our life. They're the foundation on which we build, and they determine the way that we create meaning. So when we understand what our core values or our highest values are, and we use those as the yardstick against which we make decisions, things can be so much simpler. And I'll give you an example. My dad, who was a big, strong farming man who hardly ever got sick a day in his life, had an accident where he fell down some stairs. And he broke his neck in 3 places and lost the use of his arms and was unable to breathe for himself. He was on life support, and about day 4, the head of the ICU came to my mum and our family and said, you know, we need to make a decision about what we're going to do. Is John going to live the rest of his life on this life support system? Or do we want to turn it off and see what happens? And you can imagine it was a shocking time for our family, and it was a shocking decision to have to make. And they offered to gather the next day and have a meeting with all the team and the specialists and so forth and give our family some advice. So we determined that that's what we would do. We would meet the next day. That night we were sitting sort of talking, well, I was going to say talking about it, but really we were just crying about it. And my mum said, you know, the decision is already made. John's values were pride, independence, hard work, and freedom. And here he is without use of his own arms, not able to feed himself, you know, not able to wipe his own backside. Like he would hate this. The decision is made. Go ahead and turn off the machines. And whilst that was the worst decision our family's ever had to make, and, you know, touch wood and God willing, the worst decision we ever have to make, it was actually also really simple. It wasn't easy, but it was simple, because all we did was line up his values and say, hey, in line with these values, what's the best decision here? Turn off the machine. And that's what we did. And a couple of hours later, he died. But it's still to this day a decision that none of us struggle with, which is interesting. I mean, we struggle with it in the sense that we had to make it, but we never struggle with the fact that it was the right or wrong decision. It was absolutely the right decision because that's what his values dictated. And that's the power of really understanding values. When you want to build wonderful and strong and respectful relationships of equality, you need to understand your own and one another's values, and you need to find a way to respect those. And it doesn't mean you have to have the same values. You know, the joy in the journey of life is your values might be this and my values might be this. And then we need to find the point at which they overlap. But understanding our values and being able to work with those builds the capacity for even greater understanding with one another. Then, of course, there's the element of beliefs. What do we believe about ourselves? What do we believe about our world and the way we understand it? Beliefs are generally formed when we're quite young, or the primary beliefs are formed when we're quite young. In most cases, the bulk of your primary beliefs are set before you're even 8 years old. The problem is, if I asked most of you to pull out a pair of jeans that you wore when you were 8 and ask you to wear them, do you think you'd be able to? You're all shaking your heads. That's very polite. I'd be wetting myself laughing at this point because I'd be struggling to get them over my head. I was a pretty skinny sort of a kid. Of course not. But in many cases, what we're doing is we're traveling through life using beliefs that were formed when we were children. And just in the same way as you wouldn't be able to wear a pair of pants or a pair of shoes from when you were 7 or 6 or 8, you can't operate with the same sorts of beliefs. And the joy in this life is that some of our beliefs are very enabling. They really support us to be very successful in life. But some of them get in the way. Some of them are very constraining. Once you understand that beliefs are thoughts we think repeatedly until we develop a sense of certainty about something. So if as a child you thought your opinion didn't matter as much as your big sister, if as a child maybe you were raised in a home where there was a lot of anger or aggression or violence and you thought, I don't matter, whatever it is that happened to you, it's going to inform your interpretation of yourself and the world around you. And so the task for each of us is to really understand what are our beliefs, both at the conscious level and at the unconscious level. Because if we don't understand what they are, it's sort of like getting into your car behind the wheel, driving off, and having someone reach over from the back seat and steer you in a completely different direction to where you wanted to go. And if you don't know your beliefs and the people that you're in relationship with don't know theirs, consciously as well as unconsciously, there's a very strong chance that at some point you're going to butt heads. So making the time and taking the time to really understand, what do I believe about myself? What do I believe about the people that I care about and the people that I love? What do I believe, and how does that shade the way that I understand the world around me? And that's why I put a pair of glasses there on the screen, because I like to wake up each morning and consciously choose to put on my love glasses. So even when, pardon my French, shitty things happen, and they will, I still view them from the perspective of, wow, that was unfortunate, but what can I learn that will make me better next time? And it's really important for us to understand the power of those beliefs, especially when they get in the way. Here's a way that you can kind of check yourself to see whether your beliefs are working to support you or getting in the way of you. When you're listening to the people that you love, do you listen until they have finished saying every word? Or are you busy forming up how you're going to respond as soon as they shut up and stop speaking? If you're doing the latter, there's a fairly good chance that one of your beliefs is something that's disrespecting the other person's opinion. So it's just a neat little trick that we can do to check in with ourselves to make sure that we are fully present. One of the other things that I really like to think about is the power of problems. Sometimes when problems come up, they seem overwhelming. I certainly know that back in 2020, I had 3 businesses and all of them took an absolute nosedive in cash flow. And I thought, I had all these staff and all these people that we provided support to. And I thought, I'm not even going to get through this. We're going to burn through every spare dollar that we've got. But I actually looked at it and I thought to myself, if my faith guided me through this, if I assumed that somewhere in the midst of this experience, there's a miracle, and I go looking for that, what would I find? Or as one of my mentors says, what if this is perfect? What if this is perfect? And what it did was really shift my thinking in the way that I interpreted the problem. So instead of getting stuck in judgment and anger and frustration and just winding myself into an increasingly tight ball of stress and pressure, I started being curious. And once my curiosity grew, what I noticed was, so too did my gratitude. So when you look at a problem, instead of going, oh, this is terrible and I'm an awful person and I must have brought this on myself, or maybe I don't deserve this, or, something that hooks us into a cycle of judgment, we can just stop and go, I'm curious about this. Okay, what could this experience bring into my world? What could this experience bring into my relationship? And when you start to get curious, the tightness of the problem begins to dissolve and open up. And then other solutions can come in. I sometimes talk about looking down the problem tube. When you're looking down the problem tube, the only thing you can see at the end of it is problems. What you can't see is the possibilities and the opportunities and the people and the circumstances and the ideas and the alternatives that are all around, which we can't see because we're looking down the problem tube. So what about if we actually opened up our interpretation, started to get curious and started to really generate that, what I call the attitude of gratitude? One of the things that is a little bit of a challenge with the human condition is most of us don't like our own vulnerability. In fact, I'd go so far as to say most of us are a little bit scared of our own vulnerability. We don't like that experience of kind of being torn open and left really exposed. And it's an unfortunate thing because I think the word has been militarized to mean a place of least defense where you can be attacked. We hit the enemy where they're most vulnerable. But if I think about my experience of life, and particularly my spiritual life, the time that I am most vulnerable, I'm most open, I'm a most willing vessel. And it turns out that my vulnerability is in fact the place of my greatest strength, because I just open up. I open up to other people's support, other people's ideas, other people's innovations, other people's assistance. When we're wrapped in that tight, struggly, judgmental place, even if people do reach out, they generally get repelled by our energy. When we're in a vulnerable place, we're much more open. So when people reach out, we're then able to accept that. That quote at the bottom is a little bit hard to read, but it's a quote by a woman called Brené Brown. If you're not familiar with her work, I would encourage you to go onto YouTube and just search Brené Brown, like Renee, but with a B. Vulnerability is at the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experiences. And if you think about the people that you would count amongst your nearest and dearest, whether it's husbands and wives or children or dear friends or brothers or sisters or whomever it is, the people that are closest to you will be the people with whom you feel most able to be vulnerable. And they'll have that insight and that understanding about you because they are prepared to be vulnerable with you and you are prepared to be vulnerable with them. One of the things that I think is really worth considering when we're thinking about relationships. I was raised in a family where it was very important to be nice. In fact, my grandmother, there's a line from Bambi, and my grandmother often used to use it. She used to say, "Oh, sweetheart, if you can't say something nice, it's best that you don't say anything at all." And, you know, the line from Bambi, the little rabbit standing there going, "If you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all." And that's kind of a dominant thinking in our culture. The problem is this: if you and I have a bump, if we run into each other emotionally or intellectually or spiritually, and we don't talk about that because we have to be nice, we go away with a feeling of something being in the space between us. And I often say when I'm in consulting work with companies and large corporations, if we don't name the elephants, eventually they'll sit on us. And it's a little bit like that in relationships as well. If we don't name the elephants, eventually they will sit on us. And I think it's really important to think about, how do we do respect by raising the challenging issues? Because most of you, when you think about your lifelong, your longest or deepest or most treasured relationships, it will be with people where you're actually able to have those challenging conversations. You're actually able to talk about the things that are difficult. And we can actually do that in a gentle and kind and thoughtful and curious way, instead of an "I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you how stupid you are" kind of way, where the elephants then get talked about instead of just taking up the space between us. Because it's very, very difficult when you're so loaded up with your elephants and the other person or people are so loaded up with their elephants, it's kind of hard to reach one another. You know, it's really hard to reach around an elephant. And the longer we don't talk about them, the bigger they get. I'm going to pause there. Kamala said it would be very good if I ran to time, so I'm quite determined to make sure that I do. And I know you've got some things to go on to at the end of it. But I would really love to hear any questions. So if anyone has a question, please just go ahead and unmute and share your question.
Yeah, Kamala, I think it's best you unmute everybody so that, or if they raise their hands, to unmute them to ask the question. And thank you, Heather, for that great speech. I love the words "love" and "be loved." Really super. So I'm extremely sorry for not remembering your name. I came after one meeting to another, and I hate to be late, and I was late, and that's
okay.
Threw me off.
Life happens, right?
Okay. Well, my responsibility is to conduct this Q&A, Heather. But before I start, I know there's a couple of hands are going up. Wow, I should say, what a powerful and inspirational presentation.
Thank you.
You know, it is just like what I had heard you at the World Conference. And I've certainly highlighted some of the very important aspects of respectful relationships that limit us from realizing our fullest potential. And I think we need to be aware of these and practice them in our own endeavors, whatever it may be, in order to inspire others and succeed. So I really wish to say a big thank you before we go on to questions. So I think Sashi has got his hand up. Yes, go ahead, Sashi.
Yes.
Heather, would you like to just your slide?
Yes.
You want to keep it there, or
I will just for the moment, only because I've got a little gift for people, but I'll get to that after the questions.
No problem.
Sashi, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, go ahead, Sashi.
Hi, Heather. I'm Shashi,
Hi,
and
Sashi.
I am sitting on this question for last 3-4 days. I was in a gathering where there was a 3-4-year-old kid, and he told his grandma, maybe Nani or something else, that, "Nani, I don't love you. I don't like you." And I started wondering from where those words came and how they came into his vocabulary, that I don't love you, I don't like you. So that's what I wanted to ask you since that day, that at what age this respect, values, admiration, gratitude comes into our life. If we leave our children at kindergarten and hope they will learn all these things there,
Yes.
we are mistaken. If we think when we grow up, then we will learn, it is our mistake. So I wanted, or I was looking that you will elaborate something on those lines, but I have to say, sorry, no, it was nothing on those lines. Yes, you talked about those things which we experience when we are grown up. But by that time, all the damage has been done.
Yes, great question. Thank you, Shashi. I think, look, there's an important thing to understand. People like me have actually been giving limiting beliefs a bit of a bad name over the last 10 or 15 years, because we make it sound as though it's all set in concrete and it can't be changed. And that's not the case at all. Anytime you bump into something in your life, life is supposed to be full of challenges. I actually think it would be incredibly boring if we didn't have challenges to deal with. Now, some of our challenges seem absolutely insurmountable and unable to be conquered, for sure. But, you know, a few days, years, months later, retrospectively, they don't seem that important. They just seem terrible when we're in it. So I think the first point to make is that, you know, children are forming their beliefs based on their family experience, their educational experience, their social experience, and the exposure they have to media and social media and all those other things. But, you know, when you say something like that, Shashi, what I hear is a child who is listening to something that is not respectful. So whether it's conversation at home, whether it's something that they're hearing at kindergarten or preschool or something like that, at that age, that child wouldn't even know what they were saying. So that's what we call parroting behavior. They hear it, then they say it. They don't even at that age have a way of making meaning out of that expression. And so as the grandparent, I imagine that they would sit there and go, oh, sweetheart, don't you? Well, that's okay. I'll just keep loving you until you're ready to love me again. You know, and leave it at that. But I think the bigger question that you're asking, Shashi, which I really, there's not too many things that cause me enough distress to keep me up at night, but this one does. Social media is eating our children's hearts. I'm just dead against it. Social media it's just consuming them and creating a false perspective on both reality and connection. There was a study done when I was studying psychology many years ago. I read about a study that was done during the war in Poland, and it's very sad, but it's very powerful as well. There was an orphanage that had children, like babies in it, whose parents had been killed in the war. And in one room of, I think, 6 or 7 babies, there was a nurse who didn't love her job, didn't want to be there, didn't like babies, but had to earn a living. And in another room of about 6 or 7 or 8 babies, there was a nurse who absolutely adored babies, loved the children. So she handled them a lot. She touched them a lot. She sang to them. She interacted with them. She put one of them into a cot with another one so that the babies could interact with each other. And these babies thrived. Some of the babies in the first room with the nurse who never touched them, well, the nanny that never touched them, she just fed them and then left them alone. Some of them actually died. And it's a very powerful, well understood piece of research for people who study the sorts of things that I did and do, because it became known as the nurture experiment. Without nurture, children will actually physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually begin to wither. So I just think it's so important for each and every one of us to come back into that sense of connection and belonging and relationship and really respecting and regarding one another. Because if we're doing that, we're modeling that to the children that watch us do it. If we're not doing that for ourselves and each other, then we're modeling something else to the children. Thank you, Sashi.
So I can only say one thing.
Yeah,
In
please.
reply to whatever you have just said, the social media not only eating our children, it's eating us grown-ups also.
Yes.
And we think whatever is coming out is
Yeah.
100% true. And we started sharing and this and that. So somewhere we are responsible also to pass on all these things to our following generation.
Absolutely.
And that what means that we have to do something, we grown-up have to do something.
Absolutely.
And there is not much time left. Otherwise, it will be too late.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Shashi.
Shashi. Heather, we have got Dilnaz who's got a hand up.
Right.
Dilnaz, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Heather. That was really great. And thanks to the MIG for always having very interesting and challenging forums that really, while you're cooking dinner after this, you're thinking aloud and saying, gosh, where could I make that difference? So thanks, Heather, and thanks, Kamala and Siti and all. So back onto social media, Heather, I had a quick question. I mentioned in the chat that we did a forum as part of the White Horse Interfaith Network on a similar subject of social media. Is it a double-edged sword? How do you control it with different generations and, all the problems it's created? So it is a necessary evil, a lot of people have said, especially in COVID, to stay connected. And there are those who are dead against it. How do we find the middle path with anything like this that is necessary and still could have the potential to create problems?
Yeah, great question, Dilnaz. And to be honest, if everyone's got 3 hours, then I'll answer it. But if you haven't, then I'll say this. Healthy relationships, even with ourselves, have really strong boundaries. And I think one of the things that concerns me about modern parenting is that we've stopped putting in boundaries. I don't know when we decided we needed to be our children's best friend, but I think it was a mistake. I do a lot of parent education sessions, and parents always say to me, if you could give one piece of advice, what would it be? And I say, well, in real estate, it's location, location, location. In parenting, it is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Children need to know where the boundaries are. They will push against them. They will pull against them. They will kick them. They will spit at them. They'll do all of those things, and that's fine. But they need to know that the boundaries are there, that they are clear, that they are consistent. And in many ways, social media has become the problem it's become because we don't have clear boundaries around it. Now, admittedly, we talk about mobile phones being addictive. The mobile phones themselves are not addictive. It is the applications or the apps, as we know it, on the phones, which are designed specifically to hook children into it. So the best way to protect your children is preserve the boundary around their use of it. I am dead against anyone in a preschool age using a phone at all. Dead against it. I'm dead against it as a psychologist. I'm dead against it as a family therapist. I'm dead against it as a mother. I'm just dead against us exposing our children to that kind of stimulation at such an early age. Your kids don't know. Stick your phone in your back pocket and give them a set of car keys. That's what I got when I was a kid, and I thought it was fascinating. But if you're going to give them these things to use, and yes, I understand what you've said, Dilnaz, in terms of it is in some ways a necessary evil, particularly in these last 3 years. It has been the primary form of connection. These sorts of things, we wouldn't have the opportunity to come together like this if we didn't have Zoom and these other sorts of platforms. but still it's important that we keep a sense of boundary around them. And fundamentally, I am a fan of children not taking their phones into their rooms at night. Plug the phones in out in the kitchen, and everybody does it. As Shashi said, we all need to set the example. So all of us put our phones in a basket with the chargers attached, whatever, in the kitchen at night, so that children's bodies and minds and souls and spirits get a rest from all of that sort of disruption. I hope that answers your question, Dilna.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Heather. Bye-bye, everyone. I have to leave now for my next meeting. Thank you
For being with us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dilnaz. Christine is the next person who's got the hand up. After that, we have got Tapua.
I just wanted to raise the issue with Heather on the issue of on the issue of children who were unloved, basically, not attended to, and no human contact with the next person other than the perfunctory behaviours. I have studied where that has been reversed, that damage done to children, where they have been subject to a lot of love and hands-on experience of relationships. That has been reversed, and the children have actually, those who have survived, have actually caught up, and in some cases even exceeded maybe that, because the extra attention they got. So I guess what we're saying is that anything can be reversed according to our latest understanding. That was years and years ago, that study done from my memory, which is wonderful. I know it's not on topic in terms of the social media, but I had to say it.
I think it's a really wonderful thing for you to share, Christine. I think we can get a little bit, disheartened, overwhelmed, something. It can all feel a bit much. Yes. But the human soul and psyche and spirit is just such a profoundly powerful element of our being. I've seen children exposed to some of the most, my specialty is working with children who have experienced abuse. And I've seen some children exposed to the most hideous and heinous things when they get consistent boundaries, when they get positive and nurturing interaction, when they get affirmations and acknowledgement, they flourish.
Yes.
And their repair and their recovery is so very strong, because, we often say, because I do a lot of work with children who are, or young people who are suicidal, and I say it takes one person.
Yes.
It just takes one person to believe in every other person. If you've got one person who believes in you, you'll be fine. If you believe in one other person, you'll be fine. When we have the children come together, we usually have groups of about 100 at our programs, and we do what we call a sitting circle, and we stand everybody front to back, front to back, like in a great big 100-person circle. And then I say to them, your only job is to look after that person in front of you. When I say go, you're going to guide their body so that their bottom lands on your knees. You're all going to bend into a sitting position, and all you have to do is concentrate on that person and get their bottom to sit on your knees. And it never works the first time because everyone's concerned about their own backside.
Oh, yes. Okay.
But eventually it works. And the kids are like, "Hooray!" And I say, what does this teach you? You were born to serve, not to take. But we're raising a generation of takers. Oh, Mum, I don't fit in if I don't have the latest iPhone. Great. Learn how to not fit in. It's crazy. We've created these incredible expectations on how children should be raised. Go back to nature. Go to the park. Throw the phone in the cupboard and ignore it. And as Christine said, I think it's really important that we keep a heart, a sense of hope. In my world, hope is an acronym for helping other possibilities emerge.
Beautiful.
Keeping and generating a sense of hope is the most powerful thing we can do for the generations that follow us. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. And thank you, Heather. We've got Tapua. After Tapua, we'll go to Ehsan and Farouk. And then I think one more question after that. Let's see what Tapua's question is.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I can start by introducing myself. My name is Tapua, and I work for Center for Culture, Ethnicity, and Health. I used to work for Melton City Council as a project officer for their Melton Interfaith Network. That's why I was actually attracted to this particular discussion. I work primarily with people from refugee and migrant background. And then the presenter talked about one thing that is quite projected in the refugee and migrant communities. That is the idea of subcontracting the parental duties to grandmothers and grandfathers. I think people have got the habit of actually bringing their grandparents from overseas so that they can look after their children while they are busy chasing the dollar in Australia. So you were talking about the idea of presence. Obviously, in that kind of scenario, this presence just diminishes, and it is having a very big impact because the parents are subcontracting their duties to the grandparents. Do you want maybe a little bit of elaboration on how this is impacting on children and the relationships in general?
Yeah, thank you, Tapua. I think you're making a really good point. I think that the interesting thing is that the research tells us that children who have a really strong and abiding connection with grandparents do better in life. Do better in life. And that's because, you know, at our age, I'm well on the generous side of 50. But as we get older, you know, we do get wiser. We just don't fret things that used to make us really anxious. And I don't know, we slow down, we get a little bit clearer, we get a little bit wiser, we stop this notion that the most important thing in life is to chase money and get bigger things and more things. And we kind of go, actually, really, isn't it all just about quality of relationship and, you know, the strength of our faith and the essential ingredients of life? And I think that the great advantage of having grandparents involved in children's lives is that there is a broader network of connection and belonging. You know, I grew up on a farm with my grandparents living, well, for a long time until I was about 7, living in the other half of the house that I lived in. But then eventually we got our own home and grandparents lived in their own home on the farm, but they were everywhere. And I can remember many times working away doing something and my grandfather would just pop up and he'd teach me something and then he'd walk away. And I think that has a profound impact on children's understanding of how they create connection and meaning and belonging. But to speak to your point about the sort of the outsourcing of the parental role, that's a different matter. Outsourcing to grandparents can have great positive impacts, but not if the children get the message that they're unwanted. And all too often what happens is we give the children the message that the money is more important than them. And, you know, that's a dominant social cultural element. You know, one way to control the society is make sure that they work, because then they don't have time to think, and then they don't have time to stop and reflect, and they don't have time to challenge, and they don't have time to question. And, you know, the difficulty at the moment is we've got an insurmountable set of circumstances that make it impossible for families to survive on one income. So now we've got mum going out to work and dad going out to work, and the children are going into childcare, or the children are going to daycare, or they're going to grandparents or whatever else. Now, that can be a very positive experience. But it's only a positive experience if it's integrated into the way that the parents build relationship with their children. Now, there was some interesting research come out just a couple of years before COVID, so say 5 years ago. And it talked about the fact that if you can be physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually fully present with your children for just 20 minutes a day, that builds very strong and abiding bonds and connections. Now, that's not long. And the good news for someone like me who's got 6 children and 2 foster children, you can do them all together. So that's 8 children, 20 minutes. But you have to be completely physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually present. Not on the phone, not distracted by the television, not busy doing the dishes, but fully present. Now, I found that really heartening. And it was done by Cambridge University in the UK, and they're very particular about their research. I found that very heartening, but it's not permission to only do it for 20 minutes a day. And I think that's the key. I'll tell you one other quick thing because I'm keeping you way too long. There was recently some research done in the US where they called it the 4-year, 14-year project. They had a group of 4-year-olds go into nursing homes and interact with the people in the nursing home. I think they went for 2 hours every week for a period of time, 10 weeks or something like that, a school term, I think it was. There were physical, mental, and psychological advantages to both the children and the older people. And, you know, you're probably sitting there going, well, that's not a surprise, Heather. You know, it makes perfect sense. When you hang around with the grandchildren, your joy and your presence and your excitement about life is fed. But equally, the wisdom that you have about how to understand the world and life and everything that goes on gets imparted to the children. Then they brought in the teenagers who thought that they were just going to connect with these old folk because they're a bit lonely. And suddenly we find the teenagers going, telling the older people all the things about what they were struggling with and what their challenges were and how they couldn't make sense of how mum does this or dad does that or, you know, whatever it was. And there were profound changes in physical, mental and emotional well-being for the older people, but also for the teenagers. Now, I mean, as I said, part of me just goes, well, really? Like, did we think that was revolutionary? But we've disconnected so much, we've lost the sense of that. And I think it's time that we all, as you said, that we all commit to bringing that back.
Thank you, Heather. Heather,
thank you.
Sorry.
I was saying thank you to Heather.
Right. Heather, I'm conscious of the time. What I'm going to do is, we've got 2 other hands up. We'll give chance to Ehsan and Farouk. And then after that, you complete your slides.
Right.
And then I think there's one more hand up, and we will give a chance to that one as well. And so that nobody goes away disappointed, because we can sit down over here for hours and listen to you. But I'm also conscious that you know, we've got certain amount of time within which we'll have to finish. So Ehsan and Farouk, please go ahead.
Thank you, Heather. Lovely to have you. It's great.
You.
The subject is great. My concern is that the same thing that we're talking about, individuals and individual in the family, it also is playing very large at the community level, at the society level. We have such a massive problems with lack of respect, lack of you call it love, for between the young people and the police.
Yes.
Between the people and the politicians. And for every aspect of our society, we are losing that trust and that relationship.
Yes.
Right, to the point. I think this subject came up to MIG because, you know, it was raised that how can we bridge this? between the society at large and the individuals, so that we all have a better life. The police has a better life, and we have a better life individually, and the government doesn't have so much of the massive problems, schools, and so on. So how can we bridge that, please?
Yes. Again, if you've got 3 or 4 hours, I can fully answer that question. It's a very important question, but it's also a very big one. But I will say this. The things that you talked about, the way that children behave at school, the way that police behave, but the way that the children behave toward the police, the respect or lack thereof for authority, the respect or lack thereof for politicians. It begins in the home. You know, I'm oversimplifying things, and I'm very aware of that, but it begins in the home. You learn about authority in the home. You learn about discipline and boundaries in the home. So what can we do as a simple first step? Sort out our own backyard. Make sure that we and the people we interact with and the members of our family understand the importance of respect. Equally, talk with children. You know, respectfully, if you're a bit sus about the Victorian government at the moment, well, I'd say you've got really good reason to be. I had a friend here from Singapore over the last 3 days, and she said, you know, when the Singapore government says this is what we do for our people, this is what we think is best, most people follow because they always operate in a trustworthy manner. And I thought, God, wouldn't I love to be able to say that about any politician at any level in Australia? You know, I mean, if people don't respect me, the first question I ask is, what have I done to breach that? Or what else could I do to strengthen that respect? So it's probably a little bit of an oversimplification, but in light of 2 things, the time and the fact that we don't have three hours or 3 days for me to answer that question, I want to say it begins in the home. But it's also about making sure we model what we want younger people to understand and learn. If we are behaving in a way that is disrespectful of figures of authority, we need to check ourselves. Because as we say when I'm running parenting programs, hashtag the children are always watching. Children don't say what we tell them. I mean, children don't do what we tell them to do. Children don't do what we say, they do what we do. So if we have respectful, kind, nurturing, loving relationships, by and large, the children get infected by that. And that's not something we can turn on and off. There's a saying, I think it's a Margaret Mead saying, actually, disrespect takes 1 strike, earning love takes 5. And it's true, you can do 5 fabulous things, but you do 1 thing wrong, and what do they remember? That 1 thing. So, you know, it almost means that we need to do multiples of 5 times more of the loving and acknowledging and respecting and nurturing than we do growling.
Yes.
That's a very brief answer to a very big question, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Heather, we will have one last question because
Right.
I really hate to not give a chance to this person, Angie. So we'll have that last question. I know
Right.
there are lots of questions that are coming up. So what I suggest to the members who perhaps would like to ask questions and they don't have the time to do so today, please send your questions over to me. I'll pass it on to Heather, and I'm sure Heather will be happy to respond to it. So
Yes.
the last question today by Angie 10. And then
okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Heather. I really enjoyed the topic, and it's something's very close to my heart, and yeah, just very refreshing insights and comprehensive insights. I just want to follow on your earlier comment about parenting children. And I'm just wondering if children are adult, you know, would boundaries still be very important for adult children and friends? And secondly, I guess probably the more important question that really intrigued me is if a child is separated from a parent, say during the teenage years and young adulthood years, and reconnected at, say, in their 30s, would they have to go through those stages that they would normally do to the mother before they could resume a mature relationship, healthy relationship?
Wow, Angie. So I think we're all going to have to go on a camp for a couple of weeks. I think that's the only so I can answer all of these very big and important questions. Let me say two things. So I'm going to answer your second question first. In terms of how you reestablish those relationships when there's been what we call relational disruption, which basically means something has happened that maybe you didn't have that ongoing contact with the child, or the child went to boarding school, or they went into foster care, or something happened. Reconnection can actually be very simple, but it depends on two things. Well, three, actually. First, you owning that you understand what it might feel like to be the other person. So, sweetheart, I understand that you might feel really hurt, really upset, really angry that we sent you to boarding school. I understand that. And I'd really love you to tell me what it feels like for you. I actually think that the most powerful question in the world is, can you please tell me what it's like to be you right now? Because we're always so busy trying to tell everyone what it's like to be me. You don't understand. Particularly teenagers, but I think we all do it to some extent. I've caught myself once or twice doing that. But if we were focused on the other and trying to understand what it's like to be the other. I don't have a piece of paper here with a 6 or a 9 on it, but if I drew a 6 a certain way, Angie, and held it up to you, you'd look at that and say, Heather, that's a 9. Because if you're looking at it from this way, it looks like a 9. But if I'm looking at it from this way, it looks like a 6. And most arguments is because you're 6ing and I'm 9ing. And if I kind of said, hang on a minute, you've got that perspective and I've got this perspective, I'm going to come around your side and see if I can understand why you've got that perspective. And then you might go, oh, well, that's a great idea. Then I'll come around your side and see why you've got that perspective. World wars happen because someone is 6ing and someone is 9ing. And if we actually just moved around and tried to understand one another's unique perspective more, things would be a hell of a lot easier. The second thing that's important is we must name the elephants. We must name the elephants. If there's been a disruption in our relationship, we must talk about what it is that's in the space. Because if we don't, trust can't grow. And trust is the fundamental ingredient in any relationship. And then the third thing is personal ownership. None of us like to eat salt. But throwing salt at other people when there's a problem is not the solution. It doesn't matter how the argument happened. It doesn't matter whether someone is right or someone is wrong. I step up and say, hey, I didn't like what happened, and I'd like to apologize for my part in that because I did this or I said this, and I'm not proud of that. And it might have sounded to you like this, or it might have felt to you like that. And I'd like to apologize, and I'd like to ask, what can I do to make it right? Now, even if your share of the argument is only 10%, I'm a great believer in taking your 10% responsibility. Because one of my friends, please just forgive my language for a moment, but it illustrates the point beautifully. One of my friends one time said that his wife was just really angry at him for, I can't remember exactly why, but she was really angry, and she's just at him and at him and at him and at him. And she was disrespectful, and she was rude, and she was mean, and said things that she should never have said, etc. And he said it was like she made a pile of shit. Okay, she made a pile of shit of problems. And he said, eventually, I just blew my lid and I went nuts. And I said, that's it. I've had enough of being treated like crap. And he said, and I said things I didn't like. Now, he said anyone watching the interaction between us in the few days before that would have thought I was a bit of a saint for waiting so long before I blew my lid. But he said, when I laid down in bed that night and put my head on the pillow, I was ashamed of me. Never mind what she had said or done or whatever. I was not in alignment with me. So he said, the next day I woke up and I went out, she was in the kitchen, and I said, sweetheart, I want to apologize. And she even said, oh, good. And he said, and I resisted the temptation to pull away and go, right, that's it, and walk away. And he said, I didn't like myself when I went to bed last night because I was unkind and I was angry. And, you know, my language and my energy was quite aggressive, and that's not okay. And it's not who I am, and I love you, and I don't want this in the space. And she said, well, good. I'm glad that you can see that. And thank you for your apology. It's about time. But somehow he managed to stay with it, right? He then went to work. He came home that night and his wife said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've been so horrible to you over these last few days. And she said, and it's funny because when you apologized this morning, I was even still mean to you then. But she said, the funny thing was, it was like I'd made this big pile of shit and you just put your hat on top. But as soon as you took your hat off, as soon as you owned your stuff, I couldn't look at anything except my pile of shit. And I'm really sorry, and I want to apologize. So I do think that, you know, world peace is possible, one piece of accountability at a time. I think that's really important. In response to your first point, Angie, I think that we have a notion of what connection looks like. Now, my children are spread from Perth to New Zealand, and I don't see them a lot. But in fact, one of them has actually called while we've been on this call. I don't see them a lot, but I know very well that they know they could reach out, they could speak to me, they could text me, they could call me, whatever it is, at any time, because we're always connected. So the question then is, what do you need to do or be in order to let the people know, the people that are important to you, the people that you love, the people that are fundamentally central in your life, what do you need to do or be to let them know? And little simple things matter. Every time I traveled when the children were little, I put love notes all over the house before I left, in the bottom of the Milo, or in with their toothpaste tube, or on the back of the toilet door, or whatever it is. Just really simple things, but something that they loved. And then they'd text me every time they found one and tell me. It's very simple things that we do that let people know how much they matter. And in a world that wants to fill us with all sorts of information about how horrible things are and how it's all doom and gloom, I don't think so. Like, God's got a plan. It's not immediately evident to us. But if we're created in the perfect image and likeness, then we better damn well step up. I hope.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, that was very helpful.
Thank you, Heather. You know, I think all the members will agree with me that we can sit down here for hours listening to you, but I know we do have time limitation. Therefore, I will ask you to, you have got a couple of slides.
I will, and I'll be quick about it, Kamala.
Okay.
I just wanted to say this, as part of the difference that we make in the world as a company, or as a group of companies, we work in partnership with an organisation called Buy One, Give One. And in fact, Masami Sato is my Japanese friend from Singapore who was here with us for the weekend. Every time we do something that makes an impact in the world, we also give something that helps to make an even bigger rippling effect. So it's been a pleasure to be here and spend this hour with you all. And on your behalf, we have given 1,000 days of access to toilets for families in Cambodia. That's our way of saying thank you for making the time and taking the time and being here with us and sharing this time this evening, and for the privilege of inviting me and being allowed, for me to be allowed to come and join your beautiful group. So that's just our way of saying thank you. and I am very grateful. And hopefully one day I get to come and hang out with you all in person, and we can drink cups of tea and have hugs in like real life people.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Before
Thank
I
you.
hand you over to Siti, I just want to say one thing. Heather has spent almost an hour today, and you have a look at the amount of preparation she did, and she did it all without charging MIG a single cent. And we cannot thank Heather enough for what she has done for us from the bottom of our heart. Heather,
Thank you so much.
I'm handing you over to Siti now.
Okay.
Siti,
And
go
thank
ahead.
you for all your beautiful comments too. That's very kind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We really enjoyed, and I hope next time we probably will meet in person, and we can
That
have
would
a
be fabulous.
hybrid. And thanks, Kamla, as well, for suggesting you to us, to the committee, and also for the question and answer session she took. Thank you very much. I think we all should give applause to Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I think this will be the first of many for us to meet each other. I'm waiting to see you in
Wonderful.
person.
Yes, yes.
And I'll try very hard next time not to come with my Mickey Mouse ears.
No, that's fine. And I
I'll
hope
leave it
others
to it.
will
I
say,
know you've
because we
got-
have to carry on our other business for
Yes.
the day. Thanks
Thank
again,
Thank you
Heather.
so much, people.
You
I
can
appreciate
remain
it.
if you like. You can leave if you like.
That's okay. I'll leave you to it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Heather.
I'll contact you later, Heather.
Thanks so much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
What a lovely speech it was, and a talk, and
Yes.
the answers she gave. My
Yes.
God.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So you know
Okay.
what I meant when
Yeah.
I yesterday.
So we are now quickly going back into the agenda. Any apologies received today? Any apologies for the meeting today? Jan, did you receive anything?
I think David did give his apology, didn't he?
Yeah, Jan, you're muted.
Jan,
Jan, you're muted.
Right, I'm back now. Yes,
Yeah.
David would be one.
Okay. So no other apologies. So we'll move it. The MIG prayer did. What about the minutes? Can the
Okay.
Kamla put it on the screen, the
Okay.
minutes of the
Yes.
last meeting?
Okay, I'll share it. There it is. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Just take it up.
That's it. One page.
Yeah. Is there a proposer and a seconder for the minutes, please? Could somebody who was there at the last meeting
Yes,
propose and second?
I'll-
And proposed by Sean, seconded by? Is there a seconder?
I wasn't there at that meeting,
Yeah.
so I cannot second.
for
There's
all-
nobody else seconded, but I prefer somebody else.
Farouk.
I do.
Okay. Okay, minutes arising out of the minutes. Is there any matters arising out of the minutes?
Not much,
No.
nothing.
I have one, which is the subcommittees. I haven't still received any names to join the subcommittees. I explained last time that we need from the general membership to join the events that we organize, and that's called a subcommittee, and help us organize the functions. So think about it, and hopefully you will call Jan, the secretary, and tell they are interested to join one of the subcommittees. I think I gave the thing. The next thing is, I'm going very quickly, announcements. Is there any announcements from anybody else in the committee or from the membership?
Are we still on the minutes, Siti?
No, we are out.
Okay.
No, I have got the agenda, so I'm going for announcements. Is there any announcements from the membership? No? So then the general business, is there any items that anybody wants to discuss under general business? Very
It's
good.
just that we have quite a few members tonight with us online that
Yeah.
are not official members of our group, and I would like to invite them to come and join us officially.
Well done. Yes, we would love to have you.
I have one item, Siti.
Yeah.
I think we have got I've got a new member for the Intercultural Haiti Book Club, and this member is very keen to join MIG as well. And I think she's there on the screen at the moment. Dalina Samara, are you there?
Yeah, she's up there, somewhere.
Can you unmute yourself, Dalina? And say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry I joined this meeting late because I got involved in something and I just came at 8 o'clock.
That's okay.
Good to
I
see
caught
you.
the tail end, but it was really interesting. I'm looking forward to listening to the recording.
We have got a recording, so you should be able to hear. So here's a new member. This is the first meeting she
Yeah.
has attended. She will be attending all the meetings from now on.
Well,
Lovely.
welcome.
Lovely to have
Thank
you.
you so much.
Happy to have you as well. Okay, if there's no any other business, I would like to thank all of you for attending the meeting today. Hope you're, sorry, Dan. Yeah.
Joe had something, I think. Did you, Joe?
Sidi, I remember the last for your last management committee meeting